we find this. Ultimately, since we are children of the faith, since we have flesh and blood, since He shares in our humanity, He was able to do a death blow to Satan. He was able to make sure that Satan's kingdom would be abolished forever and Satan would not have a stronghold on us. We didn't have to fear death anymore because we get the gift of eternal life. He was able to do that only because He was sinless. Only because He was acceptable to God. Only because He's the only one who could take the wrath of God for every sin we've ever done. And He can take it on His shoulders and still be the victor. Think about your own sin. We all sin. We all fall short of God's glory. That's reality. But if you think of your own sins, how guilty do you feel when you sin? I hope you feel some guilt. I hope you don't just think, that's okay, don't worry about that. But I know we all feel guilt at some point in time over our own sins. And it does keep us up at night sometimes when we sin and we know we've done wrong against God. Can you imagine taking the sins of the entire world that were ever committed or will be committed, take all of God's punishment for that on the cross? Can you imagine what that would be like? Jesus is the only one that could do that. We couldn't do that. You know, most of us, we have struggled just taking on our own sins, taking the punishment from God for what we've done. We struggle with that. We feel guilty. And sometimes we go to God and say, I just can't make it on my own. I need you to help me, Lord, because I'm sinning too much. Can you imagine taking everybody's? That's amazing. That's a gift. By Adam, who ultimately, Adam himself, he went and he grabbed a piece of fruit off the tree. We got death for that, didn't we? All of us did. But by Christ who hung on a tree, we get eternal life. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that amazing that God would do that for us? Yes, Jesus paid the price. The third thing is, you got to be willing. Got to be willing. Just because I'm close enough to pay the price, and just because I can doesn't mean I'm going to. Doesn't mean I want to. And we're going to see how that worked out for Ruth. Because Boaz says this. It's amazing. You got to picture this. Ruth comes up with Boaz. She puts herself down at the feet of Boaz. And she sleeps there overnight. And that was very significant in the book of Ruth. What she was saying is, I will humble myself. I will become Boaz's servant. I will do whatever it takes, but I want the inheritance back. It doesn't matter what it takes to get it. Boaz woke up and said, I can't redeem you. Somebody's closer to you than me. They have to redeem you first. That's the law. And when Boaz approached the fellow said this. He said, you know, I don't want to redeem you. It says here that I cannot redeem you because I might endanger my own estate. I don't want to. I refuse to. What would have been like if Jesus said that? He said, I just can't. And I can understand why. He says, I got a wife, I got children. If I decide to buy back your inheritance, I have to marry you, because that was the law. And he said, I don't want a second wife. I can barely keep the first wife, happy. I can barely keep my own kids happy. The last thing I want is a second wife, and that's just going to cause a whole bunch of fights. I don't want a second wife. He said, I don't want to pay the price. I don't want to. Boaz said, gladly, I will. Boaz paid the price, and he took her as his wife. And I got thinking, Jesus did pay our price. Even when we were alienated from God, even though we were His enemies, even though in our own minds we rejected Him, Christ freely chose us to accept the punishment of death so that all those who might believe in Him might get the gift of eternal life. Jesus did pay the price, and He was willing. It's not from what we did. Certainly not. Because when you think of all the sins we do, we'd never get to heaven. Reality is we can't buy our way into heaven because we just sin too much. Ever since the devil said, if you take this piece of fruit, I'll open your eyes and you'll see God and you'll see good and wrong and you'll see everything. Ever since that moment, we love evil more than we do good. We spend more time having evil thoughts and doing evil things than we do good. We got to ask God, help us. Just like Ruth did. Ruth went to Boaz and got down on her hands and knees and said, I'll be your servant, I'll be your slave, I'll give back my inheritance. When's the last time we've asked that? When's the last time you got in front of God, bowed, and said, I want back my inheritance? My inheritance was, I got to talk to you. I got to walk with you. I got to spend time with you. You used to call out my name all the time. I want it back. I read about Adam and Eve and what they had. I want it. When's the last time we've ever done that? God does want us to humble ourselves. He does want us to realize we can't get there on our own, and we can't. We need Jesus. We need Him to help us. But when's the last time you ever asked? We talked about choices last week. We talked about Noah. Remember how things got so bad? God said, I got to kill them all. Just nobody here is faithful. Nobody here is righteous. But he did find Noah and his family. Remember how they sent out the two birds? I want to go back to birds, the raven and the dove. And we said the raven went out and found all sorts of dead bodies. It said, I love it. I love the sin. I love the destruction. I love the death. I'm staying out the dead bodies. But the dove came back because the dove hated it. The dove didn't want anything to do with it. When's the last time you've ever come back? Really? When's the last time you ever come back and got in front of God and said, I don't like the dead bodies. I don't like the sin. I don't like the way my life is turning out. I don't like feeling guilty all the time because I'm sinning against you, Lord. When's the last time you come back and said, I want to be a dove, and I want nothing to do with the way the world operates. But you know what, Lord? I want to go out there as a light and tell them all about you. We can be a witness for God. And I think we all are. Anybody who says, I go to church, is a witness for God. You may not be a good witness, but you are a witness. When you get out in the world and they find out that I'll pick on Rob over there, that Rob's a deacon, they watch what Rob does. They watch the things he says. They watch his attitude all the time. And if Rob goes out there and says, I'd rather be the raven, I'd rather go out and participate in the world and have fun, you know what? They're going to call him a hypocrite. And it's going to be a bad witness. And we do that all the time. I'm not picking on Rob. He's no different than the rest of us. We all do that. We become bad witnesses from time to time. We've got to realize, we've got to get on our hands and knees and ask God, teach me how to be a really good witness. Because I do want to be the dove, not the raven. How much do you want that inheritance back? What are you willing to do for it? We know what Jesus did for it. He died on the cross for us. He did whatever it took to get our inheritance back. He never lost his inheritance. He always had it. But he did what it took to get ours back. Even though we stayed enemies of his, he still said, I love him. I still want it back. What do we do for him? Anything? When's the last time you ever humbled yourself and said, Lord, I just not make it on my own? And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Because I can tell you right now, you can't make it on your own anyway. You can't. You're not meant to. We're never meant to make it on our own. You think you can get out in the world and not be like the world without God? Never happens. You need Him for every single moment of every single day. You need Him to teach you how to be a dove. Because, you know what? We're more like Satan than we like to admit. We're more like the raven. We do like to sin. That's reality. Sin is pleasurable. That's a reality. But God's power is much greater. Much greater than that. But we still have to humble ourselves. And that we find very, very hard to do. That is the hardest thing that you'll ever do. But the best and the greatest reward you'll ever receive is to ask God, to cry out for Him, for help. And He says, I'll never leave you, I'll never forsake you, and I will help you. And I will show you that. Wouldn't it be nice if we could show people the light? Wouldn't it be nice to get out there and be a real good witness? Wouldn't it be nice to get out there and people say, you know, that Rob, he's a really cool fellow, he's really got it together. While he sins once in a while, you know, he really loves God. I see it in his eyes. The way he acts, the way he talks, the way he walks, the way he deals with his kids. I see the light in him. And then people start asking Rob, what do you got that I don't have? Why have you got it together? Why are you doing so good? And Rob's going to come back and say, you know, God's helping me. It's God. What an awesome opportunity to tell people about God. But it works the other way too, doesn't it? Because if you're giving a bad witness, and if you're not out there doing the right things, because you're not asking God, it works the opposite way. Because then people look at you and say, they haven't got anything I don't have. I got everything they have and then some. So my question for you, this is communion. Which do you want to be? Are you going to go after the dove? Or you still want to stick with the raven? The choice is yours. God won't force you. He never does. But you got to make that choice. You're just going to come together.